He told her she was hysterical, that her pregnancy hormones were making her irrational. As Thea clutched her baby bump, listening to her husband, Sophia, list her emotional failings, she never imagined his final words to her that night would be, "Get out." He kicked her out, pregnant and sobbing, into the cold, unforgiving night. But what Sophia didn't know was that while he was sleeping soundly in their marital bed, Thea wasn't just crying. She was coding. She was building. And by the time the sun rose, a single headline would shatter his entire world. Forbes announces groundbreaking AI startup. The founder, Thea. The polished oak door clicked shut with a deafening finality, the sound echoing the shattering of Thea's world. Outside the San Francisco night air, usually a comforting, familiar embrace, felt sharp and hostile, each gust of wind a biting reminder of Sophia's cold, dismissive words. "You're being hysterical, Thea." He had sneered, his voice a venomous whisper that had coiled around her heart, squeezing it tight. "It's the hormones. They're making you irrational." She stood on the top step of their meticulously restored Victorian home, a place she had poured her heart and soul into, a place she had believed was their forever home. Her hand instinctively went to her burgeoning belly, a protective gesture over the tiny life that was a part of both of them, a life that Sophia now seemed to resent as much as he resented her tears. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. He had been the one to push for a baby, eager to cement their status as the perfect power couple. He the rising star at a prestigious venture capital firm, and she the brilliant but conveniently unemployed software engineer, the perfect supporting actress in the grand play of his life. The fight had started, as most of them did lately, over something trivial, a misplaced set of keys, but it had quickly escalated a spark in a tinderbox of unspoken resentments and simmering frustrations. Sophia, impeccably dressed in a bespoke suit even at 9 in the evening, had paced the living room like a caged panther. His every movement a study in controlled aggression. He had accused her of being careless, of being forgetful, of being a mess. But what he was really saying, what lay beneath the surface of his carefully chosen words, was that she was no longer the woman he had married. She was no longer the effortlessly chic, always composed and endlessly supportive partner who had been his greatest asset. She was pregnant. She was emotional. She was an inconvenience. "I can't deal with this, Thea," he had said, his voice laced with a weary exasperation that cut her deeper than any shout could have. "I have a multi-million-dollar deal on the line, and I come home to this." To tears and drummer over a set of keys. "They're your keys, Sophia," she had whispered, her voice trembling. "And I'm not being dramatic. I'm just tired. And I'm scared. Things are changing so fast." He had laughed then, a short, humorless sound that had made the fine hairs on her arms stand on end. "Scared, you're scared. Try having the weight of the world on your shoulders, Thea. Try being responsible for something more than just gestating." The word had hung in the air between them, ugly and dehumanizing. It was the moment she had realized that he didn't see her as a partner anymore. He saw her as a vessel, a means to an end. And now she was a malfunctioning one. "Get out," he had said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet register. "I need some space. I need to think." "Sophia, please," she had begged, tears streaming down her face. "It's late. Where will I go?" "I don't know, Thea," he had replied, turning his back on her, a gesture of complete and utter dismissal. "Call your sister. Call a friend." Just go." And so she had. She had grabbed her purse and her laptop, the two items that felt most like her own, and had walked out of the life she had so carefully built. Her sister Chloe lived in Portland, a 6-hour drive away. Too far for tonight. Her friends, they were his friends too. Couples they socialized with people who saw them as the golden couple. To call them now would be to admit that the facade had crumbled, that their perfect life was a lie. She sank down onto the cold, unforgiving steps of her own home, a pariah on her own doorstep. The city lights twinkled below a sea of indifferent stars. She felt a profound and terrifying sense of aloneness, a feeling she hadn't experienced since she was a lonely, awkward teenager who had found solace in the logical, predictable world of code. Code. The thought was a lifeline in the swirling vortex of her despair. For years, her brilliance in software engineering had been a source of pride, a defining feature of her identity. She had been a rising star in her own right before she had met Sophia with a promising career at a top tech firm. But then he had come along with his dazzling smile and his grand ambitions, and he had convinced her that his dreams were big enough for the both of them. He had encouraged her to quit her job, to focus on building their life together. A life that she now realized had been built entirely on his terms. A wave of nausea washed over her, a familiar companion in her pregnancy. But this time, it was different. It was a visceral reaction to the truth she had been so blind to for so long. Sophia had not just been unsupportive. He had been systematically dismantling her confidence, her independence, her very sense of self. He had isolated her, convincing her that his world was the only one that mattered, that her own ambitions were trivial in comparison. But as she sat there in the darkness, a flicker of defiance ignited within her. He had called her emotional irrational. He had reduced her to a collection of raging hormones. But he had forgotten who she was before she had become Mrs. Sophia Vance. He had forgotten the girl who had won national coding competitions, the woman who had seen the world not as a series of chaotic, unpredictable events, but as a system of problems waiting to be solved. And in that moment, a new kind of resolve hardened within her. He wanted to see what she was capable of. He thought she was just a gestating vessel. She would show him. She would show them all. With trembling fingers, she opened her laptop. The familiar glow of the screen was a comfort, a portal back to a world where she was in control, where logic and innovation reigned supreme. For months, an idea had been percolating in the back of her mind, a project she had tinkered with in her spare moments, a secret she had kept from Sophia because she knew he would dismiss it as another one of her hobbies. It was an AI-powered platform designed to help female entrepreneurs connect with investors, a tool to level the playing field in a world that was still so heavily skewed towards men. She had named it Athena's Ascent, a nod to the goddess of wisdom and warfare, a symbol of the strength and resilience she now felt surging through her veins. As the first lines of code appeared on the screen, a sense of calm washed over her. The familiar syntax, the logical flow, it was a language she understood, a world where she was fluent. The tears still fell, but now they were tears of rage, of determination, of a woman who was finally blessedly waking up. She worked through the night, fueled by a potent cocktail of heartbreak and adrenaline. The city slept unaware of the quiet revolution happening on a doorstep in Pacific Heights. The world was about to change, and it was all because a man had made the colossal mistake of underestimating the woman he had just kicked out into the cold. By sunrise, Thea wasn't just going to be a scorned wife. She was going to be a force to be reckoned with. And Sophia Vance was about to learn that hell hath no fury, like a woman with a laptop and a billion-dollar idea. The first blush of dawn painted the San Francisco sky in hues of soft pink and fiery orange, a stark contrast to the darkness that had enveloped Thea for what felt like an eternity. She was still on the steps of her former home, her laptop perched precariously on her knees, her body aching with a fatigue that went bone deep. But her mind was on fire. As the city began to stir, a new kind of energy pulsed through her. The anger was still there, a hot, molten core in the pit of her stomach. But it was now overlaid with a thrilling, terrifying sense of possibility. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive, truly herself. She had spent the night not just coding, but strategizing. She had refined the business plan for Athena's ascent, fleshed out the user interface, and even drafted a press release. It was audacious, it was insane, but it was also brilliant. She knew it in her gut, the same way she knew that the baby growing inside her was a girl. With a deep breath, she took the plunge. She uploaded the press release to a platform that distributed it to a curated list of tech journalists and news outlets. She knew it was a long shot, that it would probably get lost in the deluge of 1,000 other announcements. But she had to try. Then she did something even bolder. She remembered a contact from her old life, a journalist named Sarah Jenkins who worked for Forbes. They had met at a tech conference years ago, and Sarah had been impressed by a presentation Thea had given on the future of AI. They had exchanged cards, and on a whim, Thea had saved the number. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she composed the email. She kept it short, professional, and to the point. She introduced Athena's ascent, highlighted its unique value proposition, and attached the press release. She didn't mention her personal situation, didn't even hint at the drama unfolding in her life. She let the idea speak for itself. As she hit send, a wave of dizziness washed over her. She hadn't eaten, hadn't slept, and the emotional and physical toll of the last 12 hours was catching up with her. She knew she couldn't stay on these steps forever. She needed a safe place, a place to regroup, a place to figure out what came next. With a heavy heart, she booked a room at a boutique hotel downtown, a place where she could be anonymous, where she could lick her wounds in private. The walk to the hotel was a blur. The city was waking up, people rushing to work, to their lives, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred in hers. Once in her hotel room, she collapsed onto the bed, the plush duvet, a welcome comfort after the cold, hard steps. She allowed herself a few moments of self-pity, a few moments to mourn the life she had lost. But then she forced herself to sit up. There was no time for wallowing. She had a new life to build, a new future to create. She ordered room service, a feast of everything she had been craving, and as she ate, she felt her strength returning. She opened her laptop again, this time to a different screen, her online banking portal. Her heart sank as she saw the balance. Sophia had been the primary breadwinner, and while she had her own savings, they were modest. Enough to last a few months, maybe, but not enough to launch a startup. Panic began to set in, a cold, creeping dread. What had she done? Had she just thrown away her last bit of security on a pipe dream? And then her phone buzzed. An email. The subject line made her breath catch in her throat. Forbes urgent inquiry. Athena's ascent. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was from Sarah Jenkins. She had read the press release, and she was intrigued. She wanted to schedule a call, immediately. A hysterical laugh bubbled up from her chest, a mixture of disbelief and exhilaration. It was happening. It was actually happening. The call with Sarah was a whirlwind. Thea, running on pure adrenaline, pitched Athena's ascent with a passion and clarity that surprised even herself. She spoke of the systemic biases in the venture capital world, the untapped potential of female entrepreneurs, the power of AI to create a more equitable future. She didn't have to fake the passion. It was born of her own painful experience, her own recent and brutal awakening. Sarah was hooked. "This isn't just a startup, Thea," she had said, her voice buzzing with excitement. "This is a movement, and you're at the forefront of it." By the end of the call, Sarah had made a decision. She wasn't just going to write a small piece about Athena's ascent. She was going to feature it on the cover of Forbes' digital edition. Thea was speechless. It was a dream come true, a fantasy she had never even dared to entertain, and it was happening to her now in the midst of the darkest moment of her life. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Photo shoots, interviews, fact-checking. Thea, still in the same clothes she had been wearing when Sophia had kicked her out, found herself being treated like a VIP, a visionary, a star. The irony was almost too much to bear. And then it was done. The article was live. The headline in bold, stark letters screamed from the Forbes homepage. "He kicked his pregnant wife out for being too emotional." By sunrise, her startup was on Forbes. Thea stared at the screen, her heart pounding in her chest. Sarah had, with Thea's hesitant permission, included the human element, the dramatic backstory. It was a risk, but Sarah had insisted it was what would make the story resonate, what would make it go viral. And she was right. Within minutes, the story was everywhere. It was trending on Twitter. It was being shared on Facebook. It was being dissected on Reddit. The name Thea Vance was on everyone's lips. And then the emails started pouring in. From venture capitalists who had once ignored her. From female entrepreneurs who saw her as a hero. From women all over the world who had been made to feel small, to feel emotional, to feel like they weren't enough. Her phone rang a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated, then answered. "Thea, it's Chloe." Tears sprang to Thea's eyes at the sound of her sister's voice. "Chloe," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "How did you—" "It's everywhere, Leah." Chloe said, her voice a mixture of awe and concern. "Are you okay? Where are you?" I'm in a hotel," Thea said, a fresh wave of tears streaming down her face. "Chloe, I'm on my way," Chloe said, her voice firm, unwavering. "I'm getting on the next flight to San Francisco. Don't you worry about a thing. Your big sister is coming." As she hung up the phone, a sense of relief so profound it was almost painful washed over her. She wasn't alone. She had her sister. She had an army of women she had never even met cheering her on. And she had Athena's ascent. Her new life had just begun. And as she looked out the hotel window at the city that had once been her prison, she now saw it for what it was. A city of endless possibilities. A city where a woman who had been kicked to the curb could rise up and conquer the world. And as for Sophia, she hadn't heard from him yet. But she knew it was only a matter of time. And when he did call, she would be ready. The tables had turned. The power had shifted. And Thea Vance was just getting started. The silence from Sophia was more unnerving than any angry voicemail or furious text message could have been. In the whirlwind that had become her life, the absence of his reaction was a gaping void, a storm cloud on the horizon that promised a deluge. Chloe arrived like a force of nature, all righteous indignation and fierce protective love. She enveloped Thea in a hug that felt like coming home, her presence a solid grounding force in the chaos. "I can't believe he did that to you," Chloe fumed, pacing the hotel room like a caged tigress. "That man is a monster, a soulless, egomaniacal monster." Thea, for the first time in days, allowed herself to be taken care of. Chloe ordered food, drew her a bath, and listened as Thea recounted the entire sordid tale, her voice breaking at times, but her resolve never wavering. "He didn't just kick me out, Chloe," Thea said, her voice low and intense. "He tried to erase me. He made me believe that I was nothing without him." "Well, he was wrong," Chloe said, her eyes flashing, "and now the whole world knows it." The Forbes article had taken on a life of its own. It had been picked up by major news outlets, discussed on morning talk shows, and had sparked a global conversation about sexism in the tech industry. Thea was no longer just a woman who had been wronged. She was a symbol, a beacon of hope for women everywhere. The influx of investment offers was staggering. Venture capital firms that wouldn't have given her the time of day a week ago were now clamoring for a piece of Athena's ascent. The valuation of her fledgling company had skyrocketed into the stratosphere. She was, to put it mildly, the hottest ticket in town. With Chloe by her side, Thea began to navigate this new dizzying reality. They hired a lawyer, a powerhouse of a woman named Isabella Rossi, who specialized in high-stakes divorces and corporate law. Isabella, with her sharp wit and even sharper suits, was exactly the kind of ally Thea needed. "We're going to hit him where it hurts, Thea," Isabella had said, her eyes glinting with a predatory light. "His wallet and his reputation." And then finally the call came. It was a Sunday afternoon, a week after she had been kicked out. Thea was in a conference room with Chloe and Isabella, strategizing their next move, when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. "It's him," she whispered, her blood turning to ice. Isabella nodded. "Put him on speaker." Thea took a deep breath and answered the call. "Hello, Thea." Sophia's voice was a low, controlled rumble, but she could hear the undercurrent of fury. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about, Sophia," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Don't be ridiculous," he snapped. "You've created a media circus. You're trying to ruin me." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Ruin you? You're the one who threw his pregnant wife out on the street." "You were being emotional," he said, the familiar condescension creeping back into his voice. "I needed space. And I needed a husband," she retorted, her voice rising. "A partner, not a ruthless businessman who sees his wife as a liability." "This is not a conversation for the phone," he said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "I'm coming over to your hotel." "No, you're not." Isabella's voice cut in sharp and authoritative. "Mr. Vance, you will have no further contact with my client. Any and all communication will go through me. Is that understood?" There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Sophia was not used to being challenged, especially not by a woman. "Who is this?" he demanded. "Isabella Rossi," she replied coolly. "Thea's legal counsel, and I suggest you get yourself a good lawyer, Mr. Vance. You're going to need one." With that, she ended the call. The room was silent for a moment, and then Chloe let out a whoop of triumph. "That was brilliant!" Thea felt a surge of adrenaline. The fear that had been her constant companion for so long was finally beginning to recede, replaced by a steely determination. The next few weeks were a blur of legal battles and business negotiations. Sophia, as expected, came out swinging. His lawyers tried to paint Thea as an unstable, vindictive woman who was using her pregnancy to extort money from him. They even tried to claim that Athena's assent was his idea, that she had stolen his intellectual property. But they were no match for Isabella Rossi. She systematically dismantled their arguments, presenting evidence of Sophia's emotional abuse, his controlling behavior, and his attempts to sabotage Thea's career. And then came the bombshell. During the discovery process, Isabella's team unearthed a series of emails between Sophia and the senior partners at his firm. In them, he openly discussed his wife problem, complaining about her pregnancy and her emotional instability. He had even gone so far as to suggest that he was considering cutting her loose once the baby was born. The emails were a smoking gun, undeniable proof of his callousness and his deceit. When they were leaked to the press, the public outcry was deafening. Sophia's firm, facing a PR nightmare, had no choice but to fire him. His career, the one he had prized above all else, was in tatters. The divorce settlement was swift and brutal. Thea got everything she wanted, the house a significant portion of his assets, and full ownership of Athena's assent. It was a complete and utter victory. But for Thea, it wasn't about the money or the revenge. It was about justice. It was about taking back her power, her voice, her life. And as she signed the final divorce papers, a sense of closure washed over her. The chapter of her life with Sophia Vance was finally blessedly over. She was free. And she was about to embark on the greatest adventure of her life, not just as a CEO, but as a mother. Her baby, the tiny life that had been at the center of this storm, was due in a few short months. And Thea knew with a certainty that resonated in her very soul that she was going to give her daughter a life filled with love, strength, and endless possibilities. A life that she and she alone had created. With the divorce finalized and Sophia a ghost of her past, Thea should have felt nothing but triumph. Athena's ascent was a phenomenon. The initial seed funding had ballooned into a 9-figure valuation, and the platform was already making a tangible impact, connecting hundreds of female founders with the capital they needed to thrive. Thea was a media darling, a celebrated feminist icon, and a soon-to-be mother. From the outside, her life was a fairy tale. But a new insidious unease had begun to creep in a subtle discord in the symphony of her success. It centered around Chloe. Her sister, her rock, her fiercest defender, had seamlessly transitioned into the role of CEO of Athena's ascent. It had seemed like a natural fit. Chloe was organized, ruthless in negotiation, and fiercely loyal. Thea, busy with product development and being the public face of the company, had been grateful to hand over the operational reins. The first crack appeared during a board meeting. They were discussing a potential acquisition, a smaller tech company that had developed a complementary algorithm. Thea was hesitant, concerned that the acquisition would dilute their core mission. "I think we should pass," Thea said, looking around the boardroom at the faces of her investors and advisors. "It doesn't feel right. It's not who we are." "Nonsense, Leah." Chloe's voice, sharp and confident, cut across the room. "From a business perspective, it's a no-brainer. It will increase our market share by 15% overnight." She presented a series of slides filled with data and projections that made a compelling if cold case for the acquisition. The board was swayed. Thea, feeling a strange sense of being outmaneuvered, reluctantly agreed. It was a small thing, a difference in business strategy, but it left a bitter taste in her mouth. She had built this company on intuition, on a feeling, and Chloe was reducing it to a set of numbers on a spreadsheet. The incidents began to accumulate, small but significant. Chloe would make executive decisions without consulting her. She would speak for the company in interviews, subtly reframing its origin story to emphasize her own role. She started dressing in power suits that mirrored Isabella Rossi's her demeanor, becoming more and more imperious. Thea tried to tell herself it was just stress, the pressure of running a multi-million-dollar company. She tried to talk to Chloe to reconnect with the sister she knew and loved, but their conversations were stilted and formal, filled with business jargon and talk of quarterly reports. The warmth, the easy intimacy they had once shared was gone. The true betrayal, when it came, was as swift and brutal as Sophia's initial act of cruelty. It happened during a routine check-in with her legal team. Isabella Rossi, her face grim, had requested an urgent in-person meeting. "Thea," Isabella began, her voice unusually gentle. "We were conducting a standard audit of the company's financials, and we found something irregular." She slid a folder across the polished mahogany table. Thea opened it, her hands trembling. Inside were copies of wire transfers, bank statements, and shell company registrations. The beneficiary of a series of large, unauthorized transfers from Athena's Ascent's accounts was a corporation she had never heard of. "I don't understand," Thea whispered, her blood running cold. "What is this? That corporation," Isabella said, her voice tight with anger, "is owned by your sister." The words didn't compute. Chloe. Her. Chloe. It was impossible. A mistake. A misunderstanding. But the evidence was undeniable, a meticulous paper trail of deceit. Chloe had been systematically embezzling money from the company, funneling millions into a secret account. And then came the final devastating blow. Isabella produced another document, a signed agreement. It was a deal memo outlining the terms of a hostile takeover of Athena's Ascent. Chloe had been colluding with a rival venture capital firm, a notoriously predatory company run by a man named Marcus Thorne. They were planning to oust Thea as CEO, using the embezzled funds to buy out her majority shares. Thea felt the room spin, the air sucked from her lungs. This was a betrayal so profound, so personal, it made Sophia's actions seem almost benign in comparison. Sophia had been a selfish, cruel man. But Chloe was her sister, her blood, the one person in the world she had thought she could trust implicitly. "Why?" The word was a raw, ragged whisper. Isabella's expression softened with a pained sympathy. "I did some digging into Marcus Thorne. He and Chloe, they have a history. They were involved years ago before she met her ex-husband. It seems he's been manipulating her, preying on some old resentment she has towards you." Resentment. Thea's mind reeled. She had always been the golden child, the brilliant one. Chloe had lived in her shadow, a fact that had always pained Thea. She had tried to make up for it, to support Chloe, to champion her. But it seemed a deep, festering jealousy had taken root, a poison that had now turned her sister against her. The pieces clicked into place. Chloe's ambition, her coldness, her single-minded focus on the bottom line. It hadn't been about building Athena's Ascent. It had been about taking it, about proving once and for all that she was just as smart, just as capable, just as ruthless as her brilliant younger sister. The pain was a physical thing, a crushing weight on her chest. She had survived her husband's betrayal, had risen from the ashes, had built an empire. But this felt like a mortal wound. How could she fight her own sister? How could she expose her ruin, send her to prison? But as she looked down at her swollen belly, at the life that was so close to entering the world, a new kind of resolve hardened within her. She was not just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her daughter's future, for the legacy she wanted to leave behind. And that legacy would not be one of betrayal and deceit. "What do we do?" Thea asked, her voice no longer a whisper, but a cold, hard statement of intent. Isabella's predatory glint returned to her eyes. "We fight back," she said, "and we make sure that when the dust settles, you are the only one left standing." The battle for Athena's ascent was about to begin, and this time it was personal. The days that followed were a masterclass in strategic warfare orchestrated by the brilliant and ruthless Isabella Rossi. Thea, her heart a leaden weight in her chest, had to compartmentalize her pain, transforming her grief into a cold, calculated fury. This was no longer a family squabble. It was a corporate coup, and she had to act like the CEO she was. Their first move was to quietly freeze the accounts Chloe had access to, cutting off her supply line. They did it under the guise of a system-wide security upgrade, a move so subtle that Chloe wouldn't suspect a thing until it was too late. Next, Isabella leveraged her network of contacts in the tech and finance worlds. She began to subtly leak information about Marcus Thorne's predatory practices, his history of hostile takeovers, and his reputation for gutting companies for a quick profit. The narrative she was weaving was a powerful one. Marcus Thorne was a vulture, and Athena's ascent, a beacon of female empowerment, was his next target. Thea, meanwhile, had her own role to play. She had to maintain the illusion of normalcy, to pretend that she was oblivious to her sister's treachery. It was the hardest thing she had ever had to do. Every meeting with Chloe was a performance, every forced smile a betrayal of her own heart. The climax of their counter-offensive was planned for the annual shareholder meeting a week away. It was there that Chloe and Marcus Thorne intended to spring their trap to announce their takeover bid and force Thea out. But they had no idea that Thea and Isabella were setting a trap of their own. In the days leading up to the meeting, Thea worked tirelessly. She met with her loyal investors one by one, not revealing the full extent of Chloe's betrayal, but instead painting a picture of an outside threat, a corporate raider who threatened to destroy everything they had built. She appealed to their sense of loyalty, to their belief in the mission of Athena's ascent. She secured their proxy votes, their unwavering support. Then she did something that felt both terrifying and necessary. She reached out to Sarah Jenkins, the Forbes journalist, who had broken her story. She told her everything, the whole sordid tale of her sister's betrayal. She gave her the evidence, the bank statements, the deal memo. It was a huge risk, but she was banking on Sarah's integrity, on her commitment to the truth. "I'm going to run this story," Sarah had said, her voice a mixture of shock and professional excitement. "But I'll hold it until you give me the signal." The day of the shareholder meeting dawned grey and foreboding. Thea dressed in a custom-made maternity dress of deep crimson. A colour of power and defiance walked into the boardroom with a confidence she did not feel. Chloe was already there, standing next to Marcus Thorne. She looked radiant, triumphant, a woman on the verge of getting everything she had ever wanted. She gave Thea a tight, condescending smile. "Ready for the big day, sis?" Thea met her gaze, her own expression unreadable. "You have no idea." The meeting began as expected, the usual reports, the financial summaries, and then Marcus Thorne stood up to speak. "As many of you know," he began, his voice smooth and reptilian, "I have been in negotiations to acquire a controlling interest in this company. It is my belief that with my firm's resources and expertise, we can take Athena's ascent to the next level." He then proceeded to lay out his plan. A vision that involved mass layoffs, a shift in focus from social impact to pure profit, and the dissolution of the very principles upon which the company had been founded. As he spoke, Thea watched the faces of her investors. They were horrified. This was not the future they had signed up for. And then it was Chloe's turn to speak. She stood up, her voice ringing with a false sincerity. "I know this may come as a shock to some of you," she said, "but I believe that this is the best path forward for the company. I have been working closely with Mr. Thorne to ensure a smooth transition, and I am confident that under his leadership, Athena's ascent will reach its full potential." She looked at Thea, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. "And that is why I am formally announcing my support for his acquisition bid, and why I will be voting my shares in his favor." The room was in an uproar, but before anyone could react, Thea stood up. "Thank you, Chloe," she said, her voice calm and clear, cutting through the chaos. "Thank you for making that so easy." She looked at Isabella, who gave her a slight nod, and then she gave the signal. On the large screen behind the boardroom table where Chloe's spreadsheets had been displayed, just moments before, a new image appeared. It was the headline of Sarah Jenkins's article, which had just gone live, "The Ultimate Betrayal: How the COO of Athena's Ascent Tried to Sell Out Her Sister and Destroy a Feminist Empire." The room fell into a stunned silence. The article, with its damning evidence and shocking revelations, was projected for all to see. The wire transfers, the deal memo, the secret emails between Chloe and Marcus Thorne. It was all there in black and white. Chloe's face went white as a sheet. Marcus Thorne, for the first time, looked flustered, his reptilian composure cracking. And then, one by one, the investors began to speak. They condemned the hostile takeover attempt. They expressed their unwavering support for Thea. And they called for Chloe's immediate resignation. The coup had not just failed. It had imploded in the most public and humiliating way possible. Chloe, her eyes wide with a mixture of hatred and despair, looked at Thea. "I hate you," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "I know." Thea replied, her own voice thick with a sorrow that was almost suffocating. "And that's the tragedy of it all." Chloe turned and fled the room, a pariah in the company she had tried to steal. Marcus Thorne, his reputation in tatters, slunk out behind her, his dreams of conquest reduced to ash. Thea, her legs trembling, sank back into her chair. She had won. She had saved her company. But the victory felt hollow, the price unbearably high. She had lost her sister, the last remaining piece of her family, and as a single tear traced a path down her cheek, she wondered if the wounds of this betrayal would ever truly heal. The fallout from the disastrous shareholder meeting was swift and brutal. Chloe became a pariah, not just in the tech world, but in the wider business community. The Forbes article had gone viral, even more so than the first one, and the story of her betrayal had painted her as a modern-day Lady Macbeth, a cautionary tale of greed and jealousy. Marcus Thorne's firm was hit with a wave of investor withdrawals and a series of lawsuits from other companies he had targeted. His empire, built on a foundation of intimidation and deceit, began to crumble. Thea, on the other hand, was lionized. Her story now, with its dramatic second act, had elevated her to near mythical status. She was the woman who had been betrayed by her husband and her sister, and had emerged from the ashes not just a survivor, but a queen. But the public narrative was a far cry from her private reality. The victory was a bitter one, leaving a taste of ash in her mouth. She had saved her company, but she had lost her family. The sense of aloneness she had felt on the steps of her old home returned with a vengeance, a hollow ache in the center of her chest. In the weeks that followed, she threw herself into her work, a familiar refuge from the emotional turmoil. She restructured the company, promoting from within, creating a culture of trust and transparency that was the antithesis of what Chloe and Marcus Thorne had represented. And then, 2 months before her due date, her water broke. The birth was a whirlwind of controlled chaos, much like her life had been for the past year. But when she held her daughter in her arms for the first time, a tiny perfect creature with a tuft of dark hair and her own determined chin, the world fell away. She named her Hope, holding her daughter. Thea felt a profound shift within her. The anger, the bitterness, the pain that had been her constant companions for so long began to recede, replaced by a fierce, unconditional love that was both terrifying and exhilarating. This tiny, vulnerable human was her future, her legacy, and she would not allow the ghosts of the past to cast a shadow over it. A few days after she brought Hope home from the hospital, a letter arrived. There was no return address, but she recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Chloe. Her first instinct was to tear it up, to throw it in the fire. But something stayed her hand. With trembling fingers, she opened it. The letter was not an apology, not in the traditional sense. It was a raw, rambling confession, a torrent of words filled with a lifetime of resentment, of feeling second best, of a jealousy so corrosive it had eaten her from the inside out. "You were always the sun, Leah," she wrote, "and I was just a planet trapped in your orbit. I wanted my own light, my own heat. I wanted to be the one people looked at with awe." She wrote of Marcus Thorne, of how he had preyed on her insecurities, whispering poison in her ear, promising her a world where she would finally be the star. She didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't make excuses. She simply laid her broken, twisted heart bare. The last line of the letter was a simple, heartbreaking question. "Is she beautiful?" Thea wept as she read it. She wept for the sister she had lost, for the little girl who had lived in her shadow, for the woman who had been so consumed by darkness that she had tried to extinguish the light in everyone around her. She didn't know if she could ever forgive Chloe, if their relationship could ever be repaired. The wounds were too deep, the betrayal too profound. But as she looked at Hope sleeping peacefully in her crib, she knew that she had to let go of the hate, for her daughter's sake, and for her own. She picked up her phone and sent a single photo to the number Chloe had written at the bottom of the letter. It was a picture of Hope, her tiny hand wrapped around Thea's finger. She didn't write any words. She didn't need to. The picture said it all. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed with a reply. A single word. Yes. It wasn't a resolution. It wasn't a happy ending. But it was a beginning. A tiny, fragile glimmer of hope in the wreckage of their family. Thea took a deep breath, a sense of peace settling over her for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. Her past was a part of her, a story of betrayal and resilience that had forged her into the woman she was today. But it was not her future. Her future was here in her arms, a tiny bundle of pure, unadulterated hope. And as she looked out at the San Francisco skyline, the city that had been the backdrop for so much pain and so much triumph, she knew with a certainty that resonated in her very soul that the best was yet to come. The Queen had found her purpose not just in her empire, but in the quiet, unconditional love of her daughter. And that was a victory greater than any she could have ever imagined. 5 years passed. 5 years of scraped knees, bedtime stories, and the quiet, joyful chaos of motherhood. 5 years of Athena's ascent, growing from a sensational startup into a global powerhouse, a billion-dollar company that had fundamentally changed the landscape for female entrepreneurs. Thea was no longer just a CEO. She was a philanthropist, a mentor, and one of the most respected figures in the tech world. She had built a new life, a good life, a life filled with love and purpose. Hope was a bright, inquisitive child, with her mother's brilliant mind and a compassionate heart that was all her own. They lived in the Pacific Heights house, the one Sophia had kicked her out of, but she had exorcised his ghost long ago, filling the rooms with laughter, with art, with the warmth of a happy home. Of Sophia she heard very little. His career had never recovered. He had drifted into obscurity, a cautionary tale whispered in the boardrooms of Silicon Valley. He had tried once a few years ago to petition for visitation rights, a transparent and pathetic attempt to get his hands on her money. Isabella Rossi had shut him down so fast and so brutally that he had never dared to try again. Her relationship with Chloe remained a fragile, tentative thing. They communicated sporadically through texts and emails. Chloe had moved to a small town in the Midwest, had taken a job as an accountant, and was, by all accounts, living a quiet, unassuming life. The chasm between them was still there, a vast, silent canyon of hurt and betrayal. But the photo of hope had been a bridge, however frail, and they had not yet set fire to it. And then one day, the past came knocking. It arrived in the form of a certified letter from a law firm in Ohio. Thea, assuming it was some business matter, opened it without much thought. But the letter was not about business. It was about Sophia. He was dead. A sudden, massive heart attack at the age of 45. Thea felt a strange, hollow numbness. There was no grief, no satisfaction, just a quiet sense of an ending. A final, definitive closing of a chapter she had thought was long since finished. But there was more. The letter was from the executor of his will, and to her utter astonishment, Sophia had left her something. Not money, not property, but a single, sealed manila envelope. Against Isabella's strenuous objections, Thea had the envelope couriered to her. She opened it in the privacy of her study, her heart beating a slow, steady rhythm of apprehension. Inside was not a letter of apology, not a confession, not any of the things she might have expected. It was a collection of old photographs, of newspaper clippings, of faded handwritten notes. It was the story of a man she had never known. There was Sophia as a young boy, with a wide, hopeful smile, standing next to a proud, beaming father. There were articles about his father, a brilliant but struggling inventor, a man with 1,000 ideas and no business sense. And there were letters, heartbreaking letters from Sophia's mother to her sister, detailing her husband's descent into bitterness and despair as his dreams were crushed one by a world that didn't understand him. And then the final devastating piece of the puzzle. A yellowed newspaper clipping announcing the bankruptcy of his father's company, followed by a short, stark obituary. He had taken his own life, leaving behind a wife and a teenage son who had idolized him. Sophia had been shaped by that tragedy, by the specter of his father's failure. His ruthless ambition, his obsession with success, his fear of emotional instability, it was all a desperate, misguided attempt to avoid the same fate. He had not just been a monster, he had been a man haunted by the ghost of a broken dream. It didn't excuse what he had done. It didn't absolve him of his cruelty. But it changed the narrative. It made him human. And then at the bottom of the envelope there was one last thing. A small, tarnished silver locket. Thea opened it. Inside on one side was a tiny faded photograph of Sophia as a boy with his father. On the other side was a picture she had never seen before. It was a sonogram. Their sonogram. The one she had shown him, her face alight with joy, just weeks before he had thrown her out. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. A tear not of sadness, but of a complex, bittersweet understanding. He had kept it. Through all the bitterness, all the anger, all the hate, he had kept this one small, secret piece of them. That night she did something she hadn't done in 5 years. She called her sister. "Chloe," she said, her voice thick with an emotion she couldn't name. "I think it's time we talked." The conversation was long and difficult, a painful exhumation of a shared and separate past. They talked about their father, a man who had loved them, but had never known how to show it. They talked about their mother, whose own unfulfilled ambitions had been projected onto her daughters. They talked about the shadows they had lived in, the roles they had been forced to play. And for the first time, they understood. It was not a complete absolution. The scars remained. But the wounds finally began to heal. A few months later, Chloe came to visit. She was quieter, more subdued. The hard edges of her ambition softened by a newfound humility. She met her niece for the first time, and as she watched Hope play in the garden, her face a mixture of wonder and regret, Thea knew that they had found their way back to each other. The legacy of Athena's ascent was not just in its billion-dollar valuation or its impact on the world of business. It was in the quiet, hard-won wisdom that had come from the ashes of betrayal. It was in the understanding that people are complex, that they are shaped by forces they cannot always control. It was in the power of forgiveness, not for the sake of the forgiven, but for the freedom of the forgiver. And as Thea stood on her porch, watching her daughter and her sister chase butterflies in the late afternoon sun, she felt a profound sense of peace. The storm was over. The Queen had not just reclaimed her kingdom, she had found her way home, and she knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that this was the story she would one day tell her daughter. A story not of endings, but of unforeseen and beautiful new beginnings. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of betrayal, resilience, and the birth of an empire from the ashes of a broken heart. Thea's story is a powerful reminder that our lowest moments can be the catalyst for our greatest triumphs. It's a testament to the fact that you can be kicked out, counted out, and left with nothing but still rise up and change the world. If Thea's story moved you, if it inspired you, if it made you believe in the power of a woman with a dream, then please show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more stories of incredible women who dared to defy the odds. Your support helps us to continue to bring these powerful narratives to light. Thank you for watching. They say every marriage has its secrets, some small enough to slip under the radar, others large enough to crack the very foundations of trust. But what if the secret is discovered in the most unforgiving spotlight of all, a crowded upscale restaurant? And what if, at the exact moment, a wife learns about her husband's betrayal? She's carrying his child, unsure whether to expose him, protect him, or destroy everything in one impulsive move. This story follows the meteoric rise and catastrophic fall of Derek Harrington, a man who had it all until one dinner turned his world into a firestorm of scandal and investigation. Derek Harrington had always exuded a confidence that verged on arrogance. He was the type of man people noticed in a room, tall, well-groomed, with an intense gaze that made you think he saw your secrets before you even decided to trust him. At 37, he was already heading one of the fastest-growing private tech investment firms in the country. Harrington Ventures nestled in the heart of New York City. Many had whispered comparisons. He could be the next Elon Musk, or he's aiming to dethrone Bill Gates in philanthropic efforts. Of course, those comparisons were mostly hot air in the media, but Derek ate them up like candy and fueled his ambition further. He had grown up in a modest home in Syracuse, New York, the son of a middle school teacher and an unemployed mechanic. Derek swore to himself at a young age that he would never again know the taste of poverty and uncertainty. If there was a mountain, he would climb it. If there was a competitor, he would annihilate them, or better yet, buy them out. Ever since his first big deal, a startup buyout that netted him a cool $20 million by the age of 26, Derek became addicted to the thrill of high-stakes ventures. His wife, Catherine Harrington, was the cement strength behind him. Once Catherine Barnes, she had come from an entirely different world, an only child raised in Connecticut by a wealthy yet tight-knit family who adored her. Catherine's father, Alexander Barnes, had a small but respectable real estate firm that catered to elite clients. Catherine had an aura of class that Derek desperately needed. Although he was confident in boardrooms and pitch meetings, he often floundered in high society's intricacies. Catherine taught him how to navigate those elite circles with charm and grace. For the past 6 years, their marriage had been a blend of love-shared ambition and occasional tension, particularly since Derek began pouring all his time into Harrington Ventures. Catherine had repeatedly asked for a child, a family. Derek always said, soon pushing it down his list of priorities. But finally, to Catherine's breathless joy, she became pregnant. Derek, for his part, seemed excited, though many nights he would return home after midnight, exhausted, complaining about client dinners or late-night strategy sessions. Still, Catherine believed in him. She believed in his vision, in his ability to provide not just for her, but for their soon-to-arrive child. Even if love had cooled into routine, she trusted Derek would protect their family. She had no idea her entire life would be thrown upside down by one small choice, deciding to meet an old friend for dinner in the heart of Manhattan. Catherine had not planned to be at the upscale restaurant Aux Merveilles that particular night. She was 8 months pregnant and feeling more fatigued than usual. But her college friend, Melanie Carter, was passing through New York for the first time in years and insisted on seeing her. To Catherine, it felt like an unexpected gift, an escape from waiting at home alone for Derek to walk through the door at some unknown hour. Melanie had chosen Aux Merveilles because she'd read about it in a luxury travel magazine. The interior glimmered with crystal chandeliers, and each table was separated by translucent screens that glowed with soft amber light. The gentle hum of hushed conversations filled the air, occasionally interrupted by the clink of expensive dinnerware. Catherine arrived early, leaning on the hostess stand for a moment to steady herself. A sympathetic staff member immediately guided her to a plush velvet seat and offered a glass of water. She felt a bit out of place in her maternity dress, noting the swirl of elegant women in cocktail dresses and men in tailored suits. But she brushed off the discomfort. She was here to see her friend, not to impress the Manhattan elite. While waiting for Melanie, Catherine decided to freshen up in the restroom. On her way back, something caught her attention through the filmy screen of a private dining area. At first, she had no idea why her gaze lingered there. She could see a man's silhouette, tall and commanding, and across from him, sat a slim figure with flowing dark hair. Catherine's heart twitched. The tilt of the man's head, the way he gestured with his hand, that was Derek's mannerism. But it couldn't be. Derek had told her he was in an urgent meeting on the other side of town. Her heart pounding. Catherine took careful steps toward the screen, making sure to stay hidden behind the plush drapery that separated the main dining area from the private alcoves. A waiter passed by, but she quickly turned away, pretending to examine a painting on the wall until he was gone. Then she returned her gaze to the table. Yes. It was Derek. He was dressed in a charcoal suit, the kind he wore for special private events. And he wasn't dining with a business associate. His companion was a woman with an air of cold, dazzling beauty. Catherine didn't recognize her immediately. Maybe she was a client. But then she noticed the way the woman's hand stretched across the table to rest on Derek's fingers, a gesture far too intimate for a business meeting. Catherine's stomach churned. She felt dizzy. She almost rushed forward to confront him, but some primal sense of caution rooted her to the spot. She wasn't prepared for a scene. She didn't know if she was strong enough to face the answers to the burning questions swirling in her mind. So she watched. Derek leaned in, and the woman did the same, her glossy black hair falling forward to frame her face. Catherine could make out the name Sabrina Chen from the conversation. They chuckled softly, and Derek brushed a strand of the woman's hair back behind her ear. Catherine's hands shook, tears threatening to flood her eyes. She pressed herself against the wall. She needed to get out of there, needed to breathe. She turned and hurried away, nearly running into a startled Melanie who was just arriving. Melanie took one look at Catherine's pale face, then glanced curiously at the private alcove. "Are you okay?" she asked, hands gripping Catherine's arms gently. "My goodness, you look like you've seen a ghost." In a strangled voice, Catherine replied, "I'm not feeling well, Mel. Can we go somewhere else?" Melanie, always sensitive, nodded without question. She guided Catherine outside, hailed a taxi, and insisted they go back to Catherine's penthouse so she could rest. Catherine murmured something about not wanting to be alone, about needing to talk. Once in the taxi, she told Melanie everything, that Derek was there with another woman, clearly more than a business associate. Her friend listened, anger flaming in her eyes. "You need to confront him," Melanie said. "He can't get away with this, especially now when you're about to have his child." But Catherine felt paralyzed. Her mind spun with a million scenarios, none of them good. She wanted the safety of denial, to pretend she didn't witness the betrayal. But she also wanted the raw truth. By the time they reached her penthouse, she had made a decision she would wait for Derek to come home. He would have to look her in the eye and explain. Night stretched on with excruciating slowness. Melanie offered to stay, but Catherine insisted she'd manage. She needed to confront her husband alone. So Melanie left with repeated promises that Catherine call her for any reason, day or night. The apartment felt cavernous once Catherine was alone. Her baby kicked inside her as if sensing her mother's distress. Sometime near midnight, Catherine dozed off on the living room couch, still in her maternity dress and heels, phone clutched in her trembling hand. She awoke to the click of the front door. Derek stepped in laptop bag over his shoulder tie, slightly loosened. He paused when he saw her lying on the couch in the dim light. "You're still awake?" he asked, crossing the room to place a kiss on her forehead. His breath smelled faintly of wine. Catherine recoiled, the sting of his betrayal fresh in her mind. She struggled to compose herself, but emotion burst forth. "Where were you?" Derek froze, obviously caught off guard by her accusatory tone. "I told you I had a meeting." "Don't lie," Catherine shouted. "I saw you, Derek. I saw you at Aux Merveilles with some woman named Sabrina Chen. You were touching her hair." She choked on the words, tears forming again. Derek's face went pale, then hardened with defiance. "You were spying on me." "Catherine, what were you doing there? Having dinner with a friend," she shot back. "But that's not the point. Don't try to twist this around. Just tell me the truth." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "She's just a client. Nothing more. The hair thing, it was just a friendly gesture. You know how these international investors can be. They appreciate closeness, personal connections. She's considering a large investment in Harrington Ventures." Catherine stared at him, heart twisting with disbelief. "I'm not a child, Derek. I know what I saw. That was no casual client dinner." He let out a breath, lips pressed together. "Okay. We're close. But it's complicated. Sabrina has connections with major stakeholders in Asia. She expects a certain rapport. If I don't keep her happy, we could lose a multi-million-dollar deal. So you're sleeping with her to make her invest." Catherine's voice trembled with fury and despair. "It's not that simple," Derek said, but he didn't deny it. "This is business, Catherine. And it's not... it's not what you think. Yes, she's flirtatious. Maybe I crossed a line, but it's for the company, for our future." Catherine stood, a surge of anger giving her strength, even in her pregnant state. "Our future, our child's future. This is how you plan to secure it, by betraying me." Derek's eyes flickered with guilt. But then he hardened again. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Harrington Ventures is on the verge of a major breakthrough. A single large investment could catapult us into the realm of industry giants. I can't afford to let moral qualms hold me back." Catherine felt as if the floor were dropping out from beneath her. She recognized Derek's ambition had always been borderline obsessive. But hearing him admit he'd compromised their marriage, the very sanctity of their relationship just for a deal, she had no words. A wave of exhaustion crashed over her, mingled with heartbreak. "Get out," she finally managed, voice weak yet resolute. "Catherine," he started. She turned away. "Sleep in the guest room. I can't even look at you right now." He opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it. Silent, he retreated to the guest bedroom, leaving Catherine to collapse onto the couch in tears. As she drifted in a half-conscious state of heartbreak, a single question throbbed in her mind. How could he do this to us? Sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, stirring Catherine from a fitful sleep. She sat up, her body aching from the night spent on the couch. She half expected Derek to appear with an apology or at least an explanation better than it's for the deal. But the apartment was silent. A check of the guest room revealed he was gone. No note, no text. Only the faint smell of his cologne in the hallway. Catherine felt bitterness coil inside her like a snake. Had he left for work as though nothing had happened? Trying to compose herself, she went about her morning routine, feeding their fluffy grey cat Winston, who circled her legs anxiously, making a cup of tea, gazing out at the city skyline. But none of it soothed her. Her phone buzzed with a message from Melanie. She simply texted, "I'm here for you," followed by a heart emoji. Catherine typed a quick thanks and debated what to do next. Should she confront Derek at his office? Should she call her father? Confide in him? Then as she paced through the living room, the TV caught her attention. A news ticker scrolled across the bottom, and the anchor's solemn voice filled the silence. Ongoing investigation into potential insider trading and financial misconduct at Harrington Ventures. Derek Harrington's office has not yet released a statement, but sources say officials from the SEC are looking into suspicious activity. Catherine fumbled for the remote and turned up the volume. Her heart pounded with alarm. Investigation Insider Trading. This was the first she'd heard of anything official. The anchor went on. Harrington Ventures soared to prominence in the last few years, drawing comparisons to major tech moguls like Elon Musk and Bill Gates. But now regulators question whether certain investment gains came from illicitly obtained information. Derek Harrington was spotted at a private dinner last night with an unidentified associate, leading to speculation on whether this meeting is connected to the alleged misconduct. In that moment, Catherine felt a strange mixture of shock and vindication. She remembered the hush of Oxmervale, the private table Derek's murmured conversation with Sabrina Chen. Was this the reason for that meeting? She grabbed her phone and scrolled through financial news sites. All of them were erupting with the story. Harrington Ventures under siege. One headline read, "Inside the SEC probe teased another." She found nothing that concretely linked Sabrina Chen to the scandal, only rumors that Derek was meeting with someone who might hold the key to hush money or secret deals. Anxiety clawed at Catherine's stomach. This was beyond a marital betrayal. It might be a legal catastrophe. She needed answers. She dialed Derek's cell, but it went straight to voicemail. Her next thought was to contact his assistant, the ever-efficient Amanda Wu, who always picked up or responded promptly. But even Amanda's phone rang until voicemail kicked in. Fearing the worst, Catherine decided to put aside her heartbreak for a moment and do what she could to protect her family. She reached for her coat and bag, then headed out the door, determined to confront Derek at his office if necessary. The offices of Harrington Ventures occupied the 20th through 22nd floors of a gleaming steel and glass tower in Midtown. When Catherine arrived, the usual bustle in the lobby was replaced by a tense hush. Small clusters of employees whispered, casting anxious glances toward a row of men in dark suits who were busy rifling through documents and laptops. It was clear the investigation was well underway. Catherine stepped off the elevator on the 22nd floor, where Derek's corner office overlooked the city. She braced herself for the sight of more investigators. Instead, she found the reception area swarming with them. She approached a stern-faced man, flipping through files. "Excuse me, I'm Catherine Harrington. I need to see my husband." He regarded her warily. "Do you have an appointment?" She almost laughed at the absurdity. "Appointment, I'm his wife. Is Derek in his office?" The man jerked his head toward a closed door. "He's in a meeting with the SEC officials and his legal team. Best if you wait." Catherine felt her patience slip. "I'm not waiting," she said firmly. Without another glance, she marched to Derek's office door and turned the handle. Locked. She knocked, ignoring the mutterings of the investigators behind her. After an agonizing minute, the door swung open, revealing Derek's lawyer. A slim woman in a sharp navy suit, a phone pressed to her ear. She looked Catherine up and down. "Mrs. Harrington." "We're in the middle of something." Derek's voice cut through. "Let her in." The lawyer stepped aside, and Catherine entered the office. Derek stood at his desk, arms folded, face drawn and tired. Two men in dark suits sat in chairs across from him, notes scattered on the table. They regarded Catherine neutrally before turning back to Derek. "We'll give you a moment," one of the men said, as they gathered up their documents and stepped out. An awkward hush fell. Catherine closed the door behind them. For a heartbeat, she and Derek just stared at each other. the memory of last night's argument hanging between them. His eyes flickered with guilt concern, and something else, maybe relief. "Catherine." He began running a hand over his face. "I was going to call you once this settled." Her anger reignited at his dismissive tone. "Settled, Derek. You're under investigation by the SEC. This isn't a small pothole in the road. The news is everywhere." He sighed. "Look, I can't say much right now. It's an internal matter, and our lawyers say we should cooperate, but keep quiet publicly. There have been rumors of insider trading, but it's a misunderstanding. We're sorting it out." "A misunderstanding," Catherine repeated. "Does this have anything to do with Sabrina Chen and last night's dinner?" Derek flinched at the name. "Why would you think—" "Because the news outlets are already speculating about it." "Derek," she hissed. "If you were with her to discuss some insider deal—" "Stop," he cut in, raising a hand. "I can't talk about her. Not here, not now. Let's just say I have things under control." Catherine couldn't believe what she was hearing. Under control? "Derek, the entire office is crawling with investigators. I can't even reach your assistant." Amanda was told not to talk to anyone without the lawyers present, Derek said tightly. "She's in a conference room with them now." "This is standard procedure." "Standard procedure," Catherine echoed, her voice faint with incredulity. "How far does this go, Derek? Because if you think I'm going to sit at home pregnant while you're possibly facing criminal charges—" "I didn't do anything illegal," he snapped, though sweat beaded at his temple. "Sabrina, it's complicated. She brought me some stock tips about a company we were considering investing in. She claimed she had reliable leads." "You used them?" Catherine pressed her heart, pounding. He swallowed. "Not exactly. I just moved some assets around. I didn't know it would be considered insider information. She told me it was her own research, that it was legit. I never expected the SEC to come knocking." Catherine's mind reeled. So he had used Sabrina's tips, likely crossing a line into illegal territory. She stared at him, struggling to reconcile the charismatic man she fell in love with, the father of her unborn child, with this desperate figure in front of her. Finally she said, "What do you want from me?" "Derek." He looked pained. "I need you to trust me. I'm meeting with Sabrina this afternoon to clarify things. She owes me an explanation. If she fed me illegal tips, it's on her. My lawyers can argue that I was deceived." Catherine's breath caught. "You're meeting her again? After last night?" "It's business," he insisted. "Look, I get how bad this looks. But if you want to protect our family, you'll let me handle this. I promise I'll fix it." Part of Catherine wanted to cling to the hope that he could, but she saw the desperation in his eyes, the guilt and confusion swirling there. His ambition, once so inspiring, had turned into a reckless obsession that might cost him everything. Maybe she should walk away, call her father, pack a bag and leave. But she couldn't, at least not yet. She carried his child, and some piece of her still loved him. She nodded once. "Fine. But I'm not leaving you alone in this. I'm staying in the city. I'll do what I can to help." Derek exhaled relief passing over his face. He reached for her hands, but she stepped back. "I'll trust you for now," she said, voice trembling. "But remember, Derek, trust isn't infinite. You've already broken it once." That afternoon, Catherine found herself restless, pacing the penthouse. The SEC had allowed Derek to remain at the office, but insisted he provide any requested documents on demand. His phone was undoubtedly monitored, and Sabrina Chen was labeled a person of interest. Catherine tried to focus on calm. She set up a quiet corner to rest, turned on soft classical music, and attempted to soothe the baby within her. Yet every time she shut her eyes, she saw Derek leaning across that table, saw him gently touching Sabrina's hair. How did we get here? She wondered. Have I been so naive? A phone call from an unfamiliar number broke her reverie. She picked up, heart hammering. A woman's voice spoke clipped and professional. Hello, Mrs. Harrington. My name is Caroline Patterson. I'm a journalist at the New York Daily Mirror. We're working on a story about your husband's company. Would you be willing to provide a statement? Catherine's mouth went dry. No comment, she said hastily, ending the call. But within minutes, another call came from yet another journalist. And then another. It seemed the entire press corps had decided to ring her up in search of a sensational quote. She turned off her phone, trembling with anxiety. The day crawled by. When Derek finally returned home, it was well past 8. Catherine opened the door to find him grim-faced, tie, undone hair disheveled. He looked like a man fighting a war on multiple fronts. Any progress? Catherine asked quietly. He nodded. Lawyers say there's no direct evidence yet. Just allegations that we traded on insider info for a few deals. But they'll keep digging. As for Sabrina... He paused, looking away. We spoke. She claims she's just a scapegoat. She said she's taking a flight back to Hong Kong tomorrow, and that the SEC can't touch her there. Catherine's stomach twisted. So she's running. He shrugged. Or, so she says. I tried to get her to talk to my lawyers, but she refused. She's not answering calls anymore. My attorneys are furious. They say if she disappears, it'll make me look even worse, like we're trying to hide something. Catherine eyed him. Are you still sleeping with her? Derek's cheeks burned red. No. Catherine, I messed up. Okay. I let things get too close, but it was never serious. Not on my end. She wanted to believe him, but suspicion dug its claws into her mind. Is that the truth, or just what you need me to believe? He hesitated. I'm not lying to you. Look, I promise you my relationship with Sabrina was purely for business connections. Maybe it crossed lines, but I never intended to leave you. Or... She shook her head, tears threatening again. How noble, she whispered sarcastically. Derek, I can't keep doing this. I can't watch you destroy yourself and our marriage in this pursuit of power. He reached for her, his hand trembling. For the first time she sensed he was truly afraid. Catherine, if we can get past this, I'll change. I'll make it right. Just stand by me, please. Looking into his eyes, she saw remnants of the man she'd married, the one who had once had dreams of giving them a beautiful life. Hesitantly, she placed her hand on his cheek. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. They stayed like that for a moment, broken but together. By the next morning, Catherine felt an urgent need for counsel. She made a phone call to someone she knew and trusted her father, Alexander Barnes. Despite their somewhat strained relationship, he had never fully approved of Derek's rags to riches aggression. Her father was a steady presence in her life. Dad, she said quietly when he picked up. Things are bad. Derek's company is under investigation. There's rumors of insider trading. She heard him exhale. I saw the news. Are you all right? I don't know, she confessed. He might have been unfaithful too. I feel like everything is spiraling. Her father's voice softened. Sweetheart, You need to take care of yourself. Think about my grandchild. Stress can't be good for the baby." She stifled a sob. "I know. Dad, what should I do? Should I leave him?" Alexander was silent for a moment. "I can't decide that for you. But listen, Catherine Derrick has always been a risk-taker. That's what made him successful. But it can also lead to ruin if he isn't careful. You have to consider if you can trust him to change. And if not..." She closed her eyes. "I understand." He cleared his throat. "If you need a place to stay, come home. Your old room is waiting, or I can set you up in a nearby property. No pressure. But I won't let you face this alone." Tears welled in her eyes, but she felt a measure of warmth. "Thank you, Dad. I'll let you know." After the call ended, Catherine sat by the window, watching the Manhattan skyline shimmer under the morning sun. Memories danced in her mind. Meeting Derek at a charity gala, her father hosted the spark in his eyes as he talked about turning dreams into reality, the sweet way he'd slipped a note into her coat pocket with an invitation for a first date. Where had that man gone? Meanwhile, Derek's day took a dramatic turn. He was set to appear for a voluntary discussion at the SEC offices downtown. His lawyers insisted that showing openness would help. But an hour before he was supposed to leave, a text from an unknown number arrived. "Meet me at the Park Regency Hotel room, T02. Urgent. Sabrina." His heart pounded. Why would Sabrina risk contacting him now, especially if she was supposedly leaving the country? He showed the text to his head lawyer, Edward Langley, who frowned. "That's ill-advised. She's already under suspicion." Derek frowned. "But if she has evidence to exonerate me or some angle we can use, it could save the company." Langley shook his head. "We can't stop you from going, but this is dangerous. If the SEC finds out, they might interpret it as conspiracy. You should consider letting me or one of the associates go with you." But Derek shook his head. "She might not talk if there's a lawyer present. I'll go alone, but I'll record everything." Langley frowned more deeply. "Just be careful. And whatever you do, don't offer her money or anything that can be interpreted as bribery." Derek nodded grimly. He texted Sabrina back. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Then he instructed his driver to head to the Park Regency. Anxiety prickled his skin as he imagined the worst: a sting operation, a setup by the SEC, or even blackmail from Sabrina herself. When he arrived at room 1902, he found the door slightly ajar. He knocked softly, hearing the faint sound of classical music from inside. Sabrina's voice called out, "Come in." He stepped into the suite, scanning the opulent living area. Marble floors, plush sofas, fresh roses on the coffee table. Sabrina stood by a window wearing a sleek black dress. She looked impeccable every inch, the mysterious femme fatale. Her gaze locked on Derek. "Don't be shy," she said with a purr. "We don't have much time." Derek hesitated by the door. "Why did you call me here?" She beckoned him over. As he stepped forward, she gestured for him to sit on the sofa. He remained standing. "I'm not staying long. Talk." Sabrina smiled, though tension radiated off her. "I'm leaving for Hong Kong in a few hours. I just wanted to mend things between us." "I never meant for you to get in trouble." He shook his head, anger flaring. "You handed me illegal tips. That's exactly how I got in trouble." She narrowed her eyes. Don't pretend you didn't know the risks, Derek. You're a smart man. No one invests millions blindly. You could have done your own diligence, but you were too eager. He opened his mouth to retort, but she continued. Anyway, let's not argue about the past. I have a proposition. I can provide documentation that proves I misled you, that I told you it was my own research, and you relied on it in good faith. If the SEC sees that you could walk away with little more than a slap on the wrist. Derek's heart skipped. So you'll confess to lying. She shrugged, a coy smile on her lips. I'll say whatever you need me to say, for the right price. He clenched his jaw. What price? She sauntered to a small table and picked up a folder. I have it all here, emails, transcripts. It's quite convincing. I want $5 million. Derek nearly choked. 5 million? Sabrina. That's blackmail. Her lips curled. Call it compensation. I'll be ostracized from my circles. I can't do business with you or your connections again. I'll have to rebuild from scratch. Derek's mind spun. $5 million was no small amount, but his company was worth hundreds of millions. If the investigation destroyed it, he could lose everything. Still, even if paying Sabrina might clear him, it was absolutely illegal to bribe a witness. This could bury him deeper in legal trouble. He took a step back, shaking his head. I can't do that. My lawyers would kill me. She rolled her eyes. Your lawyers, Derek. You won't need them if you're indicted. You'll be lucky to avoid jail. He stared at her, fury boiling. So this was your plan all along? To reel me in, feed me these tips, and then blackmail me? Sabrina's eyes flashed. Don't be naive. You pursued me for my connections. We used each other. Now let's finish the transaction. He exhaled, attempting to steady himself. I won't pay you a cent. If you have evidence that can help me, provide it. If not, get out of my way. Her expression hardened. Think carefully, Derek. You have a lot to lose. He turned to the door. I'm done with you. As he left, his heart pounded not just with anger, but with fear. Fear that Sabrina might release evidence that would incriminate him further, or worse, twist the facts to frame him entirely. The upcoming meeting at the SEC loomed large in his mind. Back at the Harrington Ventures office, Derek quickly informed Langley of what had transpired. The lawyer's face turned pale. She asked for money. Derek, if we even hint at paying her, it could be seen as witness tampering. We have to disclose this to the SEC, or they might discover it later and accuse us of hiding it. Derek groaned. You're right. Let's get it over with. The two hurried to the SEC building, where they were ushered into a conference room. Catherine, who'd insisted on coming along for moral support, sat quietly in the corner. She offered Derek a small nod of encouragement. Despite everything, she was there for him. The lead investigator, a meticulous woman named Francesca Morales, greeted them with cool politeness. Mr. Harrington, we appreciate your cooperation. We have a few questions. Langley gave a tight smile. We want to go on record that Ms. Sabrina Chen attempted to solicit money in exchange for certain statements. We did not comply. Morales leaned forward, interest piqued. That's quite an allegation. Do you have proof? Derek remembered that he had switched on his phone's recording as soon as Sabrina started talking. He glanced at Langley, who nodded. They handed over the audio file. It was risky, but they had no choice. If Sabrina tried to sell a false narrative, at least they had evidence she'd demanded money. Morales listened with headphones, her stern face revealing little reaction. Finally, She removed the headphones. "We'll need to verify the authenticity of this recording. For now, it appears Ms. Chen may have engaged in blackmail." She then fixed Derek with a penetrating gaze. "But that doesn't absolve you, Mr. Harrington. Regardless of Ms. Chen's motives, if you used insider information knowingly or not, you remain accountable." Derek swallowed. "I understand." The interrogation began, and it felt like a slow, agonizing dance. Morales asked about each investment, each conversation with Sabrina, each trade made in the weeks prior. Derek tried to remain calm, giving honest answers, but stopping whenever Langley advised him to. At times, Catherine interjected small clarifications, like how Derek spent nights working on legitimate research, how he had never shown awareness of wrongdoing. Morales took notes meticulously. Finally, after hours, they were dismissed. Langley told them it might take weeks for the SEC to decide whether to press charges, but at least they hadn't been arrested. Catherine managed a small sigh of relief, but Derek's expression was still grim. "This is far from over," he muttered. News of the SEC meeting spread quickly through financial circles. Rumors persisted that Sabrina Chen had fled the country. The press speculated wildly. Did the pregnant wife know, secret mistress at center of scandal billionaire, playboy, or savvy businessman? Each headline more lurid than the last. Investors began pulling out. Harrington Ventures' stock, though private, was partially linked to a public affiliate, and its share price dropped precipitously in after-hours trading. Derek scrambled to reassure stakeholders. He wrote emails, made phone calls, pleaded for patience. Some listened, others distanced themselves. The board of directors called an emergency meeting to discuss damage control. Catherine watched the meltdown with growing horror. She wanted to stand by Derek, but each day more revelations emerged about how close he and Sabrina had been. Photos surfaced of them at charity galas, at private dinners, looking more intimate than Derek had admitted. The press ran with the story, painting a picture of a torrid affair. Catherine felt herself roiling with a mix of jealousy, betrayal, and lingering love. One night, Derek returned home, late, throwing his keys on the kitchen counter in frustration. "We lost another investor. The board is furious." Catherine, who had been restless all evening, approached him tentatively. "You need a strong public statement," she suggested. "Something that clarifies everything from the insider trading allegations to your relationship with Sabrina." He slammed his fist on the counter. "I can't talk about the investigation publicly, Catherine. The lawyers forbid it. And as for Sabrina, I'd just be fueling the tabloid fire." She tried to maintain composure. "So you do nothing?" His face twisted with exhaustion. "Yes, for now. We do nothing. The lawyers say we need to wait until the SEC finishes their inquiry. Then we can mount a defense." Catherine nodded numbly. She felt shut out. Every day, the tension in the penthouse grew heavier, as if invisible walls were closing in. And Derek seemed to alternate between frantic action and stony silence, leaving Catherine alone in her swirling thoughts. A few days later, Catherine's father showed up unannounced at the penthouse. Derek had gone to the office. She welcomed Alexander in, offering him tea. He studied her face, concern etched in his expression. "You look exhausted," he said. "I can't sleep," Catherine admitted. "I keep replaying everything in my head." Alexander placed a comforting hand on hers. "Come home with me, at least for a while, to clear your head. Give Derek space to sort this out." She hesitated, torn. I don't want to abandon him." Alexander sighed. "You wouldn't be abandoning him, dear. But you're pregnant, stressed, and it's not healthy. You need calm surroundings, not SEC investigators and salacious tabloids. Catherine thought of the baby, the life growing inside her. She felt a pang of guilt. She was so consumed by Derek's crisis, she barely paused to consider her own well-being. After a long moment, she nodded. "You're right. Let me pack a bag. If Derek wants to talk, he knows how to reach me." Within an hour, she was in her father's car, heading toward the tranquility of Connecticut. She left a short note for Derek. "I'm going to Dad's for a few days to rest. I hope you understand." She didn't expect an immediate response, and she got none. Days turned into a week. Catherine settled into a guest suite at her father's estate, where the staff fussed over her, ensuring she had healthy meals and plenty of rest. She felt her body relax bit by bit, though her heart still weighed heavy. She kept an eye on the news. Harrington Ventures seemed to be on the brink. More rumors of a mass investor exodus, talk of a possible resignation by Derek if indicted. Then one afternoon, Catherine received a call from an unexpected source, Amanda Wu, Derek's assistant. Amanda's voice trembled with urgency. "Mrs. Harrington, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's something you should know." Catherine gripped the phone. "What is it?" A man came by the office, Kyle Peterson, one of Derek's old associates. He claimed to have documents that could prove Derek's innocence. But Derek is so busy fighting fires, he barely gave Kyle the time of day. Kyle said he discovered that Sabrina Chen had conspired with another firm to sabotage Harrington Ventures. He said it was personal for her. She wanted to ruin Derek. Something about an old family feud. Catherine's pulse raced. Wait, an old family feud? Sabrina never mentioned anything like that. "I don't have details," Amanda said, "but Kyle swore he has proof. Sabrina manipulated data to make it look like Derek was trading on insider info, when in fact it was all her doing. He tried emailing Derek, but with the SEC monitor it might get lost. I think Derek's ignoring him because it sounds too far-fetched, but Kyle seems genuine." Catherine thought back to Sabrina's chilling composure, her blackmail attempt. Maybe Sabrina had orchestrated the entire fiasco, setting Derek up for a fall, while reaping her own profit. It was a terrifying thought, but it made sense given her abrupt disappearance and hush-money demands. "Amanda, can you put me in touch with Kyle directly?" Catherine asked. "Of course. I'll text you his number." Minutes later, Catherine spoke to Kyle. He explained that Sabrina's father, Wei Chen, once competed with Derek for a major Chinese tech merger. Derek's success had apparently cost Wei Chen a fortune and tarnished his reputation back home. Kyle believed Sabrina sought revenge under the guise of forging a business relationship, planning to entangle Derek in legal trouble. She fed him tips that appeared legitimate, but in reality they were gleaned from corporate espionage or manipulated data. Then she let the SEC discover them. "I have documents showing Sabrina's father orchestrated the entire infiltration," Kyle said, "and also a recorded phone call where Sabrina brags about how easy it was to seduce Derek into compliance." Catherine felt anger and relief swirl together. If Kyle's evidence was real, it could vindicate Derek. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" He hesitated. "I only discovered it a few days ago, rummaging through old servers and unsubscribed email accounts. I used to manage some side projects with Derek, but we parted ways after a disagreement. I had no idea Sabrina's infiltration ran this deep. I thought I owed it to Derek to come clean now." "Thank you," Catherine said earnestly. "Please get those documents to Derek's lawyers. And also send a copy to me." Catherine returned to the city, the very next day. Her father tried to persuade her otherwise, but she insisted. "If these documents can save Derek, I need to be there," she said. At Harrington Ventures, she found Derek hunched over a conference table, scattered with papers, eyes bloodshot. The board was in an uproar. The SEC investigation was intensifying. Media outlets were calling him the next Bernie Madoff. It was chaos. Catherine entered the room and placed her hand on Derek's shoulder. He flinched at first, then turned to see her. A mixture of surprise and relief flashed across his face. "Catherine, you're back." She nodded. "I have news. I spoke to Kyle Peterson." Derek frowned. "Kyle, I haven't seen him in ages." Quickly, Catherine explained what Kyle had told her. She saw Derek's eyes widen, a spark of hope igniting. "If he really has that evidence, we can prove Sabrina was the mastermind. This changes everything." "It does," Catherine agreed. "We need to move fast, though, before Sabrina disappears for good." Derek called an emergency meeting with Langley and the legal team. Kyle arrived with a briefcase full of documents and digital files. He walked them through each piece of evidence, showing how Sabrina had infiltrated Harrington Ventures, forged research reports, and leaked them to Derek under false pretenses. The final damning piece, a recorded phone call, where Sabrina gleefully admitted Derek is so hungry for power, he won't even question where the data comes from. By the time the SEC is done with him, he'll be ruined. Langley's eyes shone with triumph. "This is exactly what we need. With this, we can build a defense that Derek was the victim of fraud. He'll still face questions about his due diligence, but it's a significant shift in liability." Derek looked stunned, as if someone had handed him a life preserver, just as he was drowning. He turned to Catherine, voice thick. "I don't deserve you. I was so reckless. I should have known better." She placed a hand over his. "Let's just get through this." Armed with the new evidence, Derek's lawyers presented everything to the SEC. The response was immediate and dramatic. Francesca Morales grilled them for hours, verifying the documents, analyzing the authenticity of the recordings, and cross-checking them against Sabrina's earlier claims. 2 days later, the SEC issued a statement. They were redirecting the focus of the investigation toward Sabrina Chen and her associates. Derek remained under scrutiny for negligence, but the criminal angle for insider trading was all but dropped. The media pounced on the story of the scheming mistress, fueling a new wave of scandalous headlines. But for Derek, the worst legal nightmares seemed to recede. He wasn't out of the woods. Entirely civil penalties for failing to perform proper diligence could still be on the table, and Harrington Ventures' reputation was badly tarnished. Investors remained wary, but at least the threat of prison no longer loomed. Throughout the madness, Catherine stayed by Derek's side, though their personal relationship remained strained. She had forgiven him enough to fight for his exoneration, but the wound of his betrayal festered. One evening, after a grueling day of damage control, they sat in the living room. Derek poured himself a stiff drink, offered Catherine sparkling water instead. They sipped in silence. "Thank you," he finally said, "for not walking away, for finding Kyle, for everything." She nodded. "I did it for our child, and maybe for the Derek I thought I knew." He winced at that. She continued, "Where do we go from here?" He drained his glass. "I can't pretend this didn't happen. I failed you. I was so blinded by ambition, I forgot the vows we made. And Sabrina." Catherine cut in gently. "Let's not talk about her anymore." She sighed. I'm not sure what's next for us. But I do know that if we're going to move forward, we need honesty therapy and time." He closed his eyes, a single tear escaping. "I'll do whatever it takes." In the weeks that followed, Derek officially stepped back from the CEO role of Harrington Ventures, appointing a trusted associate to steady the ship while he sorted out the final legal tangles. The board reluctantly agreed, seeing that Derek had become a lightning rod for controversy. Meanwhile, Catherine focused on her impending motherhood. She invited Derek to prenatal appointments, and he came. Their interactions remained cautious, but as they witnessed the ultrasound images and heard the baby's heartbeat, a profound sense of shared responsibility bound them. Then one crisp autumn morning, Catherine went into labor. Derek rushed her to the hospital, eyes wild with worry. Hours later, they welcomed a baby boy, whom they named Andrew Alexander Harrington. Andrew for Derek's late grandfather and Alexander for Catherine's father. Holding their newborn son, Catherine and Derek felt something shift. The swirling chaos of the past months faded, replaced by a fragile hope. They had survived betrayal scandal and near financial ruin, but life had given them this new beginning, a chance to change. Epilogue. Short conclusion. Within the novel. Over the next year, the SEC investigation wrapped up. Derek settled the negligence charge with a hefty fine and strict compliance measures. Harrington Ventures, though, battered, rebounded under new leadership, and Derek devoted himself to philanthropic initiatives while quietly rebuilding trust among colleagues and loved ones. Sabrina Chen never resurfaced in the US, rumored to be hiding out in Hong Kong under her father's protection, though whispers of further legal action haunted her. For Catherine and Derek, the road to healing was long and winding. They attended counseling, learned to communicate more honestly, and above all focused on raising little Andrew in an environment of love and stability. Through tearful confessions and late-night heart-to-hearts, Catherine began to forgive, and Derek sought to become the man she deserved. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, life rarely is. But in the hush of their child's laughter and the quiet strength of renewed commitment, they found the seeds of something real, something worth preserving. And though the headlines had screamed betrayal and scandal, the final pages of their story were yet unwritten, carrying the possibility of redemption and a new kind of happiness. Life can twist and turn in the most unexpected ways. For Derek and Catherine Harrington, what began as a shocking betrayal escalated into a high-stakes legal drama threatening to tear their lives apart. Yet amidst scandal and heartbreak, they discovered a glimmer of resilience and a reminder that even when everything seems lost, hope can emerge from the shadows. In this story, we've witnessed secrets laid bare, ambitions tested, and a love that struggled to survive the storm. Ultimately, it is a testament to the power of truth and the choices we make in the wake of our deepest regrets. If you found yourself enthralled by the twists and turns of Derek and Catherine's journey, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more captivating tales of ambition, betrayal, and redemption. Your support allows us to continue bringing such stories to life, and we can't wait to share the next chapter with you.